Welcome to the AI innovation space. We are your experts, and I'm Iyanu.
And I'm Todd.
We're here to offer our unique insights and hold conversations with top leading innovators in the world of AI and machine learning.
We dissect and discuss the often complex realm of AI in an accessible way and go deep in discussing the innovative technologies that impact our lives every day.
This podcast is sponsored by Ellumen, an IT contractor offering a creative and human-centric approach to medical imaging, cybersecurity solutions, training and support, and more. Ellumen's values of ingenuity and connection make us a leader in adopting innovative technologies for federal healthcare and beyond.
Visit Ellumen's website at www.ellumen.com for an overview of the services offered and to read our blog series on leveraging AI for your business. Thank you so much for listening, and let's begin. So we're so glad you're here for another edition of the AI innovation space. Today, we decided that it would be a good idea to get our audience up to speed on Iyanu, some of Iyanu's work. So how are you doing today, Iyanu?
Hi, Todd. Great to be here. Our last conversation was amazing, and just being able to cover some of the things that you've been working on, it's really, really great, So really excited to be here again this week, Todd.
Great. So, Iyanu, why don't you just kind of start off and maybe give everyone an introduction about kind of what your background is.
Yeah, sure. So, my background, I started as I did my bachelor's in computer science, and then from there, I moved to doing my master's in bioinformatics. With the bioinformatics, in the bioinformatics space, some of my work was around how to analyze, protein sequences, so these sequences are sequences of amino acids, and so, an amino acid sequence has between, I think, about 20 alphabets. And what I was trying to do was to figure out how to, categorize these alphabets for information retrieval. And I moved from there to do my PhD in information systems. And my work was more in the area of drug repositioning and how to apply AI ML in the drug repositioning space. So that's a little bit of a summary. Outside of that, done some work in the cybersecurity space using machine learning, to do some work in the intrusion detection area. But, it's been fun to figure out how to take AI application or AI technique and apply it to something that really helps to solve real complex human problems.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Iyanu. So you mentioned drug repositioning. Can you kind of talk more about, the specifics of what does that mean and how did you get interested in getting involved with that?
Great question, actually. I had been looking at ontologies initially for my dissertation, but I figured, I think 2 years into my dissertation, there was a specific crisis in my immediate family that made me start paying closer attention to, more of the drug repositioning space. This was, an issue where an extended family member had a specific type of cancer. And it was imperative for me to figure out how to use, the knowledge I was learning, to solve some problems in that specific area. And so initially I thought to myself, do I work on prediction? And I looked at a bunch of papers. There were a bunch of papers out there on prediction, how to do, prediction, meaning how to predict these diseases early before they actually occur. And then I thought, to myself, why not focus on how to find better solutions to the problem. And not to say that prediction isn't great ideas. I think a great idea. I think when you have someone who's been in a specific, or had cancer for quite some time, some would advance from stage 1 to stage 3, stage to stage 4, and then it becomes really, really complex. But how do we also find solutions, to this problem? So early detection was good, but actually being able to cure was also as equally important. And so I looked into, the drug repositioning space, because I thought that, currently you have like the chemo and some other therapy that helps, but we still realize that it's still something that's somewhat of a problem. How do we find, drugs that have been, or medications that have been used for other sicknesses or diseases, and how do we use them or repurpose them and use them, for things like cancer, or find something that was used for headache and use it for diabetes. I mean, these are just hypothetical situations, but how do we find such drugs? Why? Because these drugs have probably gone through trials anyways. So it brings down or reduces the time it would take on taking it or repurposing it for another disease. And so that was kind of like the idea around entering into the drug repositioning space.
I see. Thank you for sharing, Iyanu, your personal story and more about drug repositioning. Yeah, I definitely feel like being able to take drugs and apply them in different creative ways that they haven't been used for currently definitely could help with curing cancer and other types of diseases, as you mentioned. I see a paper that you published called "Acquisition of Diabetes-Related Biological Associations Using a Motif-Based Network," and you presented some preliminary results related to drug repositioning. Can you kind of expand on kind of the research you did for that?
Yes. So before we get into the drug repositioning space, right, there was a need to figure out how to gather this information. And I think that even, with some of the work that I've done in the past, there's just been a real huge need to really have really nice data sets, that could be effective or could be used, for drug repositioning. To be able to do that, it's important for us to use already existing data sets to make some inference. And so, if you go into just databases in general, you have these biological networks, if you will. We have gene to gene, disease to disease, protein to gene, protein to disease, those types of relationships, right? But some of these relationships have been studied so independently. And so, the biologists would focus on maybe a gene to gene relationship, and not necessarily, drug to, gene relationship, right? Or they take a specific gene and they work on that gene for years. And so the idea here was, how do we take all of these data sets and find the most useful patterns, or most useful disease element types to study? Should we study gene, drug, disease, or do we study drug, protein, drug, those relationships? That was the goal, that's what we're trying to get at with that specific paper.
I see. Okay, thanks for sharing. And I also see another interesting paper that you worked on called "Analyzing Rhabdomyosarcoma Using the Multimodal Clustering Approach."
Yep.
Can you talk a bit more about your work with that paper?
Basically, the idea behind that specific paper was, now you have these data sets which we're able to curate. We had about 16 disease related elements that we're working with. How do we take that and then analyze it and then identify drugs that can be actually repurposed? Right. And so, we had like different data sets, DNA sequence. We had like gene to gene SNPs, cellular components that were connected in some way. And the goal was to be able to figure out ways of bringing this together and analyzing them to find or identify drugs that could be repurposed. Rhabdomyosarcoma, is popularly found among kids, and this was inspired by, a doctor or this analysis was inspired by a doctor. I don't think it was a doctor. It was actually a scientist who had his child go through certain situations and wanted a study to be done. And so we took that and we started analyzing to identify drugs that could be repurposed.
So where do you think the drug repositioning field is going to be going? Like if you were giving advice to someone like kind of starting in that field, what would you tell them? Like what did you learn from your experience?
I think that, like, for me, it's been really rewarding to be able to focus more on like a direct application of AI, right? We talk about this all the time on our podcast, like when we had Dr. Janeja on. It's really finding, how AI could actually assist or help in making the doctor's work better. And so one of the things that was really important in all of this research, that I was working on or still work on, is to make sure that we're getting that feedback from doctors as to, what they thought about our approach. Specific work that we did with the phosphorylated proteins, which is around prostate cancer. The goal then was to really figure out, okay, well, we are getting these outcomes. How do we confirm that these outcomes are actually positive or negative? And the ability to be able to work with, the BBRIC lab, which was the lab that I worked with, to really test to ensure that what we're getting was actually was correlated with what they're actually getting in the labs, was extremely important. So I think that one of the lessons that I learned just in the whole process of it is, for the AI not to work isolated, right? But to actually be able to find, some way of confirming from the medical experts themselves.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've done a lot of articles on the Ellumen website where we talked about, AI tools and triage and talking about, using AI to help radiologists. So do you see this as another potential way to, possibly help radiologists or other types of doctors, like in a triage situation?
Yeah. I think that, I use this analogy a lot. Many times people walk into a doctor's office and you have to tell the doctor what's wrong with you, right? So if you and I were to go to the doctor's office, right, the doctor would ask the question like, okay, why why are you here, right?
Right.
And we could say, oh yeah, I have a headache, right? Okay. And the headache might be, oh, okay, if you have a headache, you use this specific, medication, right? Maybe use Tylenol or use some medication, right? And the headache might just be the symptom of a completely different issue,
Right.
right? And so essentially, if we're able to take tests outside of the scope of what the patient says, the idea behind that is the doctor can tell the patient what's wrong with it. It's kind of like you going to the car shop, and then your mechanic plugs, the engine that does a test on the entire system, and then it instantly tells him, well, the battery, needs to be recharged, the tires need to be fixed, that kind of a thing. So I think that, the advantage of these types of systems is that, right, we'll be able to offer some level of personalized care to patients, right? And also I think also it has a way of embodying, it embodies the whole entire, not just early detection, but also like some type of cure, in the process. It's still in its inception, or our work is still in its inception stages, but that's the potential that it does have.
For sure. And yeah, we touching on the personalized medicine, we did have another article that we published, if you recall, about personalized medicine and AI's role. We talked about how AI can be leveraged to, use sophisticated computation and inference to generate insights, and how AI's role in recent research has shown that it could help, solve these challenges. Any points you want to bring across on any of that work?
The field of AI has done so much or is doing so much in the medical space, but I think there's still even more that could be done. And in some of the work or some of the things that we covered in that article, I think that now the radiologist, unlike before, where like there wasn't as much sort of collaboration, we are seeing a lot more collaboration between scientists and radiologists now. We're seeing a lot of that. As a matter of fact, I have friends that are, in the medical space, but they're also computer scientists, right?
Right.
So I think the value of, the fact that I think we're talking about the AI being the radiologist's best friend. I think that was the kind of analogy that we're giving to it, if I remember correctly. I think that now there's more eyes on, well, this is more of something that could assist us in getting out our point than, the computer scientists are trying to take our jobs.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you bring up some good points there. And, if our audience missed that AI role in personalized medicine article that we were talking about a bit, one of the things we mentioned in there is how that AI can help to help with disease prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And so AI could be leveraged to help identify individuals with, for example, like a genetic predisposition to disease, and help halt those kind of diseases early.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like a lot of the groundwork that you've been laying on that type of research definitely will be useful, very useful going forward.
I think that we would continue to see more of this sort of interest in, this space as, as the world moves into the, AR, MR, VR space. I think I'm not sure if it was last week while we're talking about waves and things like that. I started doing some more research, and I started looking at how like some doctors in Hopkins are basically able to do like surgeries using some of these, amazing devices. So it's incredible to see like, how, AI, how AR, VR, MR are, getting really merged into the current existing systems. Other things that I would really like to cover, some of the things that I've, worked on, one is with regards to focused crawling. Focused crawling is the idea behind like using NLP, to find really important topics that you really want to focus on, right? And so we have this huge sets of huge amount of data. Like, how do we drill down to a subset that are really key and really important? Right. And this could be applied to different domains as well. So, another area that I've dived into is the focus crawling space. Well, we don't have as much time to cover it. I'll probably cover it some other time.
I see. So I'm just curious because I've heard of that, with like search engines. So how does that apply to AI? It's just a matter of trying to drill down on the data that you're going to be using.
Yeah. So, so the whole idea is that like it's kind of like your web crawlers, right? You want to focus more on the topics that are important. So what I could do is take 10 articles, right? That are extremely important, to a specific subject matter, and then use those 10 articles to search for others that are as equally important, as opposed to searching the entire space.
So I think now we wanted to take some time, like we did in our last podcast, to go over a couple of current events that are going on in the world of AI. So one of them that I just came across recently was the Department of Defense decided recently they want to hire their first chief digital and artificial intelligence officer, and also establish a new office for this position. Any thoughts on that, Iyanu?
I think it's super amazing, right? Because a whole lot of, work thus far, it almost appeared like AI was like sort of running at this, or the AI space has been running at a specific speed. And it's hard for the community, the state, to sort of catch up with what's been going on in this space. And yourself and I would agree that we've been having some conversations around like just how harmful some of these things have been, to individuals, right? What I mean by harmful is you don't really know what people are doing with your data, right?
Mm-hmm.
When AI is being applied to it, right? What information are they collecting? What decisions are they using that information to make, right? What's the
Right.
bias, and stuff like that. And I think the sooner, systems like this start getting set up, it's also easier from a policy standpoint to start protecting the interest of the public. So, I think it's really, really pushing the right direction. What are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good step in the right direction. I think it will help the Department of Defense kind of focus more on AI efforts instead of having, various departments that are kind of led up by different individuals, and maybe they don't always have the knowledge of,
Yeah.
what's going on.
Mhm.
And I think it will maybe help, kind of get everybody kind of up to the same standard as to how they're
Yep.
approaching AI and those kind of topics. So I think it has very positive impact.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about that specific article is I remember this specific sentence was the goal is to optimize their value and try to consider them from a very holistic standpoint. And I think that like having institutions, government institutions really embrace the technology would help one to safeguard its use, because now it's being used, by a system itself. So I think it's a push in the right direction for sure.
So another topic that I recently came across is, the baseball park in Baltimore called Camden Yards. I heard next season when they start baseball again, they're going to be using this new scanning system that will use AI to help detect, if people who enter the ballpark are, potentially carrying some sort of a gun or a weapon.
The funny thing, while I was thinking about this article, I thought about you.
Yeah,
Why?
it does. It does. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you know why? Because I thought about like, what we're talking about last week, right? With your project, right?
Mm-hmm.
The technology that you build and you've been working on, and I was like, wow, like I was just out of curiosity, like how are they able to do this? And I said, Todd probably would know this.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely has a lot of relation to kind of the work that I've done in the past. I mean, the concept here is I guess there's this company that they kind of came out of some research from MIT, and they're using a low frequency radar and 3D imaging to detect the concealed weapons. And they're also using the artificial intelligence to help interpret the data. But yeah, a lot of the work that I've done in the past, it had applicability to weapons detection.
Yeah.
But adding this AI element, I thought was very intriguing about, helping to interpret the data. And the other thing that I thought was very interesting, if you want to get into some of the details about how it actually works, is so it has like a system millimeter wave technology that takes a reflection off the body. And that's very similar to kind of what I was sharing on our last podcast on how I was looking into microwave imaging, and we were looking at reflections from the body to detect what was in the inside the person. In this case, we're detecting a concealed weapon. The other thing that's interesting about this technology is that it also can detect weapons beneath clothing, and it has the ability to detect weapons that are not even metal. Like it could detect like a 3D printed gun or a plastic or a liquid explosive. So, it's a little bit different technology than like a regular metal detector. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting was that you wouldn't even have to, empty your pockets or your keys or your phone when you're going through this technology, which I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate.
Wow. I'm just thinking to myself, how is it even possible? Wow. I mean, this is really amazing.
So it sounds like, Camden Yards is kind of one of the first sites that will be using this. I think there's a few others that were mentioned in the article that's going to be testing this out. So it'll be interesting to see if, this potentially replaces kind of the old school checks that you see, at airports and other kind of large venues.
Yeah. So the article also referenced about maybe 1,000 people, was it 1,000 people at the time? I'm not sure, it was talking about the volume of the crowd that
it said that it can screen 1,000 people per hour.
Oh, I see.
I don't know offhand how that compares to, the current technology, but it sounds like probably more to me.
Right. Yeah. That would be if they entered one after the other, right? That wouldn't necessarily be okay. Got it. Because, also another thing that I thought of was, oh, well, if you had like 1,000 people entering at the same time, would it be able to detect that, if they have to go through a specific device, to be able to do it, I would assume that would be one per time, right?
I mean, my understanding is that it's still going to be like one person at a time because I guess the way the technology works is it generates this 3D image using AI. And then it's basically showing on like a video screen that someone would be monitoring, like a mannequin. And then in the mannequin, it would indicate if there's a threat or not. And if there was a threat, it would kind of indicate where in the body the threat would be. But what was interesting is that it's not actually like saving or producing any image data. It's like all calculated like on the fly using the AI system.
Yep. That was interesting to see as well.
So one other, topic here before we wrap up that I thought was interesting. I recently came across an article, talking about the role of AI bias in hiring decisions. And so, for example, like I guess New York is trying to implement a new law. And the similar laws have been, proposed or implemented in other areas like Illinois and Washington, D.C., where they're trying to prohibit employers from using artificial intelligence in such a matter for recruitment, resume screening, and like video interviews that it doesn't have any sort of bias, and is fair. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, I'm very, very, I've been very sort of passionate about that specific, subject, and I really like the, at least based off of what I read in the article, the approach that the state was intending to use in, preventing such, occurrences. I think that like if any company can explain the reason or the way the AI does its prediction, and they're able to show that is unbiased, then they could get some sort of clearance to continue to use those systems, right? as opposed to using systems that are inherently biased. Some not intentionally, right? And some
Mm-hmm.
might perhaps be intentional. But I'm speaking to even some of these unintentional cases, right? If you're able to like really explain what it is that the AI is doing, you start really seeing or identifying where the biases may exist and, make adjustments to the system, then all great, you're cleared. But if you can't, then, at the end of the day, it's like, you just see history kind of repeating itself again. And I think maybe systems also need to be built to inherently identify some of these biases.
Right.
It's probably really, really huge, like a system that can take a specific, code and identify the biases based on standards that have been set by the state or government. I think that would be really, really, extremely valuable, right? You take all the policies and, create an AI system out of it. And then that AI system is then further able to test, all the different other systems, to see where there's some discrepancies.
Yeah, for sure. So my understanding with this particular law is that they want to have like a regular bias audit that occurs by some like third party independent auditor who would test the AI software, in this case for like resume screening or video interviews or recruitment, to basically see and make sure that they weren't discriminating potential employers based on, protected groups, like race, age, sex, religion, national origin.
Yep.
So I feel like it definitely seems to be a step in the right direction. Although it would be nice to kind of, see more of these technologies kind of getting off the ground and not having these implicit biases like you mentioned that have kind of plagued some other types of algorithms today.
Yep. I mean,
so I guess, do you feel like, this has potential to, impact other, areas where they're using AI, these kind of bias audits, or do you think this is kind of focused on more of the employment area? Like, do you think it has more broader applicability?
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I was going with the initial thought around it, right? It's like, this is good for a start, but it would really be good if, other systems start to really think about this. You see what I'm saying?
For sure. I agree. Yeah. So I think that pretty much covers what we wanted to get to today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time, and thank you, Iyanu, for taking more time to share about some of the work that you've done and drug repositioning and cybersecurity and amino acid sequencing and all that great work you've been doing.
We've always promoted, the AI ML as a tool that can assist, not just doctors, but we can assist anyone, in making their work better. And the more you start looking into, and I'm speaking to our audience, the more you start looking into how, your data works or the data you're collecting and how AI could be applied to them, the better you're able to move, your businesses and companies forward. So that's my little concluding thought.
This has been the AI Innovation Space, sponsored by Ellumen. Thanks so much for listening.
Be sure to connect with us through LinkedIn and the Ellumen website to learn more about how AI and emerging technology can help you. Also, be on the lookout for our next episode coming soon. Thank you so much for joining us.